We're going to go now into the trumpets, the misunderstood trumpets and bowls of wrath. As you've already seen, if you're following my messages on my YouTube channel, you saw that chapter 4 is not the rapture of the church and then just hell on earth through the rest of the book. Chapter 4 is the Father sitting in heaven waiting for the Lamb to bring that sacrifice, that eternal perfect sacrifice, to pay the debt of those that he has written in that scroll that are sealed up. And in chapter 5, the freshly slain Lamb rises. See my messages on those two chapters. They're very important. But the Lamb, the freshly slain Lamb rises in chapter 5, and he has paid the debt for those chosen by the Father. And we came to the seals, to the 6 seals. They're not the tribulation. They cover the entire church age, from the early church to the end of the tribulation. See my messages, my last message on that. The seals cover the entire church age. And the 6th seal covers the tribulation, because during the tribulation, people can and will be saved. And a lot of the church will go into the tribulation because they weren't waiting, weren't watching, weren't prepared, didn't have their lamps lit. They were in the world, they were loving the world, and they got caught by that thief in the night. That's the 6th seal. It covers those that get saved and go into the tribulation. And as we come to chapter 8, we saw my last message, so important. Chapter 8, verses 2 through 5 is the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. It's the latter-day rain being poured out upon the church. The ones that get saved during the tribulation and the ones that go into the tribulation. And this book flows so perfectly when you enter the narrow gate and stay on the narrow way, which is Christ himself. You will know the truth. You'll see the light. That is the way we have to go into this book. It's a revelation of him, as the first verse says of the first chapter. This is a revelation of the Son of God. And this book is so glorious, but those on the broad road to destruction have you in non-stop, one unbelievable, unimaginable destruction after another continuously, the most incredible things you could ever hear. And yet they tell you that the Antichrist, the king of the beast, will rule and reign upon the whole earth to where you can't buy, sell, and trade without taking their mark, without taking their number. How could that be? Buy, selling, and trading? It's not what they told you. There will be a disaster, one disaster that will set off the tribulation. And we're going to go into that next. And you're going to see something, saints. You're going to see that the 6th seal, which covers the tribulation, the trumpets, and the bowls of wrath are all the same thing. They're just describing from different viewpoints, different angles, the same thing. You're going to see that very shortly. And let's get into it. Let's get into the trumpets. These are the things that the Holy Spirit has revealed to my wife and I as we're out here in this wilderness. We didn't expect it. It's been glorious. It's been marvelous. He's opened this book. Please follow my messages. Subscribe and follow my messages. I don't want anything from you, nothing, but to hear and see these things and for you to pass on this word. And in Revelation chapter 8, verse 6, where we ended up, and the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound them. Remember, this is right after the latter-day rain. And trumpets were blown. In the Bible, they're mainly for God's people, to sound the warning, for them to come to get instructions, to prepare to march, to assemble for war, and to return from being dispersed. These trumpets, these messages to the church are to bring the church back together, to get instructions, to prepare to war, to prepare to march, to go out and do what the church was meant to do, and that is to preach the gospel. And as this latter-day rain, they're going to have the pre-tribulation of rapture. I call it the first fruits rapture of those waiting, watching, prepared. Their lamps are lit. They don't love the world and the things of the world. They're waiting for him. He'll come for them. They will go. See my message on the wedding feast. They will go to the wedding feast. In Israel in those days, in a Hebrew wedding, the groom would take his friends to his father's house and they would have a feast. That's the wedding feast you read about in the Gospels. They would have a wedding feast while the bride prepared herself for the wedding. That's what's going to happen. There's going to be the first fruits rapture, the pre-tribulation rapture. All those ready, watching, and waiting are going to be caught up, and they're going to go to a feast, a wedding feast with the Lord, while the tribulation comes upon the earth, and the church that wasn't ready and those that get born again during the tribulation will prepare for their wedding. And the glory and the power of God will fall upon them like it hasn't fallen since the early church. It will be the latter-day rain. And as that falls so gloriously, we turn into these messages. And the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound them. In verse 7, and the first sounded, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Now those on the broad road to destruction try to tell you this is the entire, complete earth. That can't be. The green grass upon the entire earth. Saints, what happens? What sets off the tribulation in 1 hour of one day, and why you can number the days of the tribulation, right down to the middle and then to the end of the tribulations to the day, is because when Babylon falls in 1 hour of one day, that's the first hour of the tribulation. And that nation that controls the world, that the world's governments and commerce depend so vitally upon, will fall in 1 hour of one day. And how will that happen? What the sixth seal, the seven trumpets, and the seven bowls of wrath are describing is an asteroid hitting the earth, a moderate-sized asteroid. And what is being described here is not the entire earth. You're going to see that these things that they think are happening to the entire earth are happening to where the asteroid hits. And what it's saying here, and the first sounded, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees and all the grass. That's in the area of that country where that asteroid hits. 1/3 of that will happen in that country. In that country, if you see my message, it's the United States. It's that country that controls the earth, that holds back the evil countries. We'll go to war with them. We would stop anything. We're that one country that's described in Babylon falling. See my messages on those things. But this happens. I want to show you how the sixth seal and the trumpets and the bowls of wrath are the same thing. So we have this coming down to earth, and it says hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass. That's in that country where that asteroid hits. Scientists say that if an asteroid enters the atmosphere, before it even hits, very quickly before it hits, intense heat will come over that area as it's pushing down to earth. And it will be setting fires split seconds before it hits. That's why you see these things first. The fire, the hail, falling to earth, and this burning. And what do you read about the first bowl of wrath? That's in Revelation chapter 16, verse 2. And the first angel went out and poured his bowl into the earth, and it became loathsome and malignant sores upon the men who had the mark of the beast and who worshipped his image. Saints, the trumpets are at the beginning of the tribulation's messages to God's people, telling them what happened, why it happened, how it happened, what it is. The bowls of wrath are to and for those who reject God, turn to the kingdom of the beast, turn to the Antichrist, take his mark, the outcome of it, and the outcome of the asteroid by the end of the tribulation. The trumpets are the beginning of the tribulation. As the asteroid hits, messages to God's people. The bowls of wrath are the same thing, but the end, the results of that during that 7 year immediately and continuing through and ending in that 7 year period. The bowls of wrath are the messages, the consequences of those who reject Christ and turn to the kingdom of the beast, turn to the Antichrist. So, chapter 16, verse 2, and the first angel went out and poured his bowl into the earth, and it became loathsome and malignant sores upon the men who had the mark of the beast and who worshipped him. The first trumpet is showing us that atmosphere is entering the earth and setting fires on the trees and the grass on fire, even as it's coming to the earth, split seconds before it hits the earth. The first bowl of wrath is the result of that entering the atmosphere, ruining a large part of the ozone, and by the end of the tribulation, those that have rejected Christ will have these sores, will have the results of this ozone being depleted and destroyed. Let's go now to verse 8. And the second angel sounded. Chapter 8, verse 8. The second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. Listen to that, saints. Something like a mountain was burning with fire and was thrown into the sea. If that doesn't describe an asteroid to you, what does? Asteroids are like mountains, giant rocks, and as they come to the earth, they catch on fire. This one will hit in the ocean off the coast of the United States. And listen what it says there, saints. And a third of the sea, 1/3 of the sea became blood. What sea? The sea, it's going to be the Atlantic Ocean that asteroid hits in. Immediately after it hits in that ocean, 1/3 of it, the sea becomes blood, turns to blood. That's not what it's talking about. You can read this, put these things together. It's talking about death. We'll see that later. The sea will lose its life. The life in that sea, 1/3 of it will die when and as the asteroid, and very shortly after the asteroid hits 1/3 of that sea, the life in it will die. And look at the second bowl. And the second angel poured out his bowl into the sea. It's the same thing, saints. The second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became blood. It just said that on the trumpet. 1/3 of it, that was as the asteroid hit, 1/3 of it will immediately lose its life, be destroyed as the asteroid hits and shortly after. And now, as I said, the bowls of wrath are the outcome of that. By the end of the tribulation, and the second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, it's the same thing, and it became blood, like that of a dead man. See, that's what it's talking about, death, the end of that sea, the end of the life of that sea, and it became blood like that of a dead man. And listen, saints, every living thing in the sea, in that ocean, died. The beginning of the tribulation, the asteroid will hit into an ocean, and immediately 1/3 of that, the life in that ocean, will be destroyed, killed, or die as a result of it. By the end of the tribulation, by the end of that 7 years, that whole sea will be dead. The life in it will have died, and all the living creatures in it will have died. And we're going to go on. I don't want to make these messages too long because I know everybody's attention span on the internet is so short. But we see that, and you're going to see that even clearer as we go through these. So please come back. You have to hear these messages. You have to go back and hear the previous messages to understand this fully.